So these three guys had come to the South as part of the Freedom Summer campaign to help register people to vote. And when they went missing, it gained national attention because our SNCC came out publicly and said that they thought that these three men had been kidnapped and murdered, like Emmett Till. Now, we haven't talked about Emmett Till in class, but a lot of you do know who Emmett Till is. Emmett Till was a young boy who in the early 50s had been kidnapped from his home and killed by two white men because Emmett Till had said, "Hey, baby," or "Bye, baby," or something like that to a white woman in a convenience store. Now, it turns out she told her, husband that he, said more than just that or whatever. But regardless, the men were found not guilty and they got away with it. And actually, just a few months ago, a couple years ago, this woman came out and admitted that she made the whole thing up and that Emmett Till was killed for no reason. But he was like 14 or 15 when he was killed. So it was a really, really, big story at the time. So SNCC saying that something similar is happening here is also a really big deal. But obviously the Mississippi police are going to disagree, and they were basically not investigating it at all. So LBJ ordered a massive manhunt and investigation into the disappearance, and ultimately their bodies were found buried in a dirt dam 44 days later. They had all been shot at point blank range. Turns out it was the KKK. And Mississippi refused to prosecute anyone. So the only thing the federal government can do, they can't charge him with murder because it wasn't a federal murder, it was a state crime. But ultimately the federal government charged about 18 members of the KKK with civil rights violations, but only 7 of them were convicted and they got fairly minor charges. So this is really showing a lot of that violence and, the rigged system that we've been seeing in the South. This is playing out on a national field now for everyone to see. So even though the murders are gaining national attention, everyone was really freaked out. The volunteers kept coming to Mississippi to help register people to vote because they knew that the work that they were doing was important. Now, as for the MFDP, they actually went to the Democratic Convention that August, and they requested to be recognized as the state of Mississippi's official and only Democratic Party because the other Democratic Party was an all-white racist one. So Fannie Lou Hamer, who was the child of slaves, grew up very, very poor, basically grew up a sharecropper, very, very poor. She got up in front of the Democratic Party at the convention there, and she was one of the founding members of the MFDP, and she gave this incredibly powerful speech about the struggles that she had been through and the struggles that her family had been through and faced, and all the discrimination they had seen up until that point. And she said that they can only solve those problems if Black people were actually able to vote and have a voice in their government. Now, ultimately, they did lose the vote to become the official party, but they did decide on a compromise, and that the Democratic Party agreed that they would put 2 of the members of the MFDP on the National Party board if they would make sure to include more minority members in the future. But the MFDP didn't think that that was enough. They wanted more. They didn't want to seem like pushovers, like they were just sort of taking scraps, so they didn't agree. Ironically, the Mississippi's, regular Democratic Party had left the convention because they were mad that the National Party had even offered them that compromise. So all in all, the Democratic Convention in 1964 was just an absolute hot mess.